Hello Internet, today we're going to be taking a look at a new WebAssembly project. It's called Blazor and it's coming from Microsoft. And so what it lets you do is build a website in C#, compile that into WebAssembly, and then have the WebAssembly render your page on the website. And so the cool thing with that is you're working with C# and not JavaScript or TypeScript or Dart or whatever else you might be working with. It's all native, and it all gets compiled into assembly code, WebAssembly code, instead of going into something that the web browser traditionally understands, which would be like JavaScript or yeah. So I've never worked with this project, so if you're here looking for a tutorial, this isn't going to be it. We're going to be mostly just playing with this. I'm going to try to make a basic project and kind of get some bearings. This is going to be about the second time I've touched this framework, so I'm still new to it, and hopefully you are too, because we're going to hopefully learn the limits of where this is. It's all preview stuff. This is definitely not a final thing. So this is in the preview version of Visual Studio 2017 using the Blazor Alpha. So not stable, but I think it should work. So we're gonna try it. So let's just create a Blazor test. And so this is going to create a new thing. There's an O, not an E. Oops. So that's wrong. There's two options here. One for Blazor and one for Blazor with an ASP.NET Core hosted. I don't know the difference, so we'll probably end up creating both. Let's do that. So this will be the first one. This will be just Blazor. And then the next one will just be Blazor with an ASP.NET Web or ASP.NET Core backend. So let's just do that immediately, see what's different, and see what we care about. I imagine they're going to look almost identical, but let's spell it right this time. Blazor test with ASP. Definitely not the best names, but we'll work with it. So the options don't change. You don't get Docker or anything like that. You don't need it. This is all native stuff. This isn't a server you're hosting. This is you providing this one assembly and people taking that and just building it. Okay, so the difference is you get an ASP.NET server alongside your client. So you saw it generated two projects here and actually has a shared thing between them. So this looks like there's a shared project so that both of them can access the same file, like view models if you're sharing data between the two. And then you can have a backend server and a front-end client, and it just generates all of that for you. Let's not do any of that. We'll probably want to do more with that later, but for now, let's stick with the basics. I don't need a backend server for this stuff. I just want to create like a basic list. That's sort of my goal, is let's just create a basic list that will display some tasks. I want to be able to add things into this list and take them out. I think that'll be easy. This looks very similar to what I would expect. Not what I would expect. One sec. Let's see, there's a counter here. So this is actually very similar to React, if you're familiar with that. Or at least it looks like it. Meh. So I'm gonna just start this and see what we get. Let's change this browser to say Edge. Sure. So I'm just gonna start this and see what the default project is. It looks like we have a counter and some fetch data stuff. This should just count and increment itself, but let's figure that out, and then we can move on. All right. So it started two things. On the left is going to be the console that started first. And you can see all of these requests are going through. This is, if you're familiar with ASP.NET Core and ASP.NET, that should look familiar. That's the same kind of thing you'd see. This is what we get from the default app. We get a home, a counter, and fetch data. So it looks like these are our pages. We had, if I would go into the Solution Explorer, we had counter, fetch data, and our index, which I'm assuming is home. It's kind of all assumptions here. But the counter is what I have here. I'm gonna make that big so that you guys can read it. And so all we're doing here is invoking this function increment counter on click. So it looks like basic HTML, like I was comparing it to React previously. React kind of merges your HTML and your JavaScript. So you get a render page that would render components in React. In this case, it looks like we get a similar thing. We get the components up top. I don't know if that's the name for them. And then we have our functions that we're actually invoking below. And so this way, we have a onClick that actually allows us to talk to this. We have a persistent state, which is our current count, referenced like this. And that's just building our page. So theoretically, just guessing here, there's a for. So it looks like at kind of accesses C#. So if I do at for int I equals 0 to I less than 5. And we'll just increment I here. And let's just print a paragraph that's going to say at I. Right? So if we do this, if this is working the way I think it's working, we should get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 in a list. And if that's true, then this becomes very easy. Does it hot load? I don't really know what that would entail, but let's try. One thing you'll note is there was that loading thing. It's WebAssembly, so it actually has a binary that you get and then is compiled by the browser. So this is only going to work in modern browsers, which probably isn't great. I imagine crawlers are going to have a lot of trouble with this, but we'll see. It's all new, so it's not really something you can bring to a production app or really release anywhere. I'm not sure I would recommend that, at least at this point, but it's getting there, especially with Microsoft's backing of it and pushing of this. So I imagine this is going to be relevant very soon. So it didn't reload, so let me just click this restart button. And so hopefully all of this works, and now we have a list inside of our counter. And then after that works, because I'm going to totally assume that that's going to work. There's no reason it shouldn't, right? Ha, it does. Cool. So we can embed code just like that, and it just works. Let's make this even better. Current count. Oh, I can just reference it like that because this is already a code block. I don't need the at a second time. So I should be able to start this now, and as I increment the counter, we should see new items get added. So that I should start at, it shouldn't be anything. So we'll get here. We've got our counter. There's nothing there, but if I click this, we start getting new entries pop up, which is perfect. It means if we're trying to write a list, this is going to work great for us. Because now I can just create a list, a C# list of elements, and actually just store them there. Another thing I'm noticing, there's no debugger. It doesn't seem like. So the debugger just automatically detaches, it seems, which I'm not a fan of, but I'm sure that's something that's going to be coming eventually. I imagine you need some integration with the web browser to get that to work, so that's probably why. But it doesn't look like you can debug these yet, at least not with Visual Studio's debugger. So if that's something you want, unit tests, I guess. I guess the cool thing is you can now write XUnit tests for your front end. That's neat. So we're going to leave this here for now. I need to create a new page because I don't want to reuse this. I want to actually make a new page. Don't really know what that entails, but we are going to try. So it looks like it's just these CS HTML files. We'll create one of those. Content view. I have no idea which one of these don't look right. These are Xamarin Forms. Cool. Let's grab something. It can't be that hard to find. CS HTML. No templates. Cool. Well, we'll just start from here, I guess. Actually, there's no templates, so we'll just copy this counter. And we'll name this our list. Sure, why not? So this, I don't think, is going to just show up. We can test that. But this should be a separate list. You got to give the, what are these called? Breadcrumbs? I don't think that's the right name. The URL, you have to give that. And then everything else should stay the same. It's still going to be a counter, but now it's in a separate page called list. I imagine we didn't accomplish anything here. I do think we can access it. So yeah, this didn't work at all. It's not showing up on the left side, so there's something else handling that. But if I go to /list, I'm curious. Yeah, so it does work. So this way we actually get these endpoints. You can see nothing's highlighted over there. We didn't like get redirected to the counter. We're actually at our list endpoint. It's just being, yeah, you doesn't show up. So everything still functions. Cool. That's great. Exception has occurred. I may have killed Visual Studio, but we're going to pretend like I didn't. So the next step, I need to figure out how those page lists on the left side on the sidebar are getting managed. Looks like there's a nav menu here. And there we go. So we can just copy the counter. I don't know what the glyph icon is, so it's not, I'm not going to have any idea how to modify that necessarily. There we go. So we want this to go to list, and we'll just call it a list. So now we should have something in our sidebar that we can actually use. Hopefully that all goes well, and then we can just implement that list like we normally would in a C# app, and then we're done. We've created a list. There it is. So awesome. It all works. This is surprisingly easy. I was expecting this to be less easy. So that's good. I'm pleasantly surprised. So can't drag and drop that because that tries to copy it. We need to create a list of actual things, not this. So let's create an unordered list. And this is going to be gross. There's not going to be any styling to this. I'm not doing any of the CSS or anything. Why can't I delete things? I'm hitting backspace right now. There it goes. There seems to be something that holds it up, and I'm not really sure what. But I was encountering that on a few other pages as well, where it just wouldn't delete immediately. And I'm not sure why. But we'll ignore that because it's all beta stuff. I don't expect you'll hit that later. So we'll need list elements, cool, or list items, whatever you want to call them. And we are going to just call these we need two things in them, I think. We need a completed. So we're going to have I don't know how to do a checkbox. And how do you do that? It's, shoot. We'll ignore that for now and just call it a div span. We'll call it a span. That way everything will kind of go the same. And we'll just do @name. So this is going to be the name of whatever we just create. And we'll create a form like so, and put our button inside the form. And this is all just basic HTML stuff. If you've done HTML, you probably know more about it than I do because I don't work with HTML that much. But here we go. We need a input. Whoa. You're being weird, Visual Studio. I'm not sure I like it. Input type equals submit. So if you do that's not right. That needs to go on the button. But if you do a type equals submit on a button, that is how, if you're like entering password or username password or something into a field, if you hit enter in the password field, the browser is automatically going to take a button with submit on it and use that. So automatically click it when you hit like enter. So that's something you kind of want just for usability, but I think I'm doing this right. We're going to pretend. Content, I don't know the name. All right, I'm gonna go look these two up because I don't know. This is more just HTML stuff that I'm not familiar with because I don't work with it. But after that, we'll come back and we should be good. So one sec. All right, I think I've got it. We have our input here. I was forgetting, you just do different types on the input. So in this case, we have text that we're going to name our things. And then we have these checkboxes, which are going to be bound to whatever. And then there's just a value field that you would bind to. So if I set this like false, I think that's how that works. And this to test, why not? Let's just make sure this is working. These are hard-coded. That name is not going to work right now, so we'll just call it hello. But everything else should work. So if I click that button, we should see some element pop up with a checkbox and something that says hello. And then once that's done, I'll create a quick data object. We'll probably do it outside of there. And then we can actually integrate this and do an actual list. So it's just inserting into the list we create. So if I click this, we've got our test there and we have our checkbox. So I can check it and that should get reflected back into our C# code, I think. So don't know how the data binding exactly works. I don't know if it's one way or two way or whatever, but I'm hoping this will kind of show us how that's working. So we'll see. And if not, then we'll figure something else out. So I'm going to delete both of those because I don't think we need them. Actually, yeah, it's just basic C# stuff. So we need a class. Let's stick it at the top level because I can't think of a better place to put it other than creating a folder for this one class. And I just don't want to do that right now. I don't really want to put it in this file. I don't think that makes sense, but we'll put it here. List item view model. I'd like, when I'm displaying data, I like to call it a view model. I think that differentiates between my data and what people view, because sometimes you'll operate on your data between what people see. So the view model just kind of signifies that this is something for display. It's not something for storage. And that just kind of helps me in the back end. So we need two things, a Boolean bool, and we're just going to call this our completed get and set. So these are just going to be two basic properties, default properties, one for the completed and one for I'm doing Java things. String name get set. Cool. So there is our list item view model. Let's bring that into our list like so. And now I want to create a linked list, I think. Do I? I'm not so sure. Let's do a list. So when I'm iterating over things or appending to things, I like to use a linked list because the inserts on those, at least inserting onto the end of a linked list, is constant, because as long as you have the end reference. Whereas with an array list, you might incur cost from doubling the array and copying everything over. So I typically like to use linked lists, especially if you're just iterating over them. In this case, we might have the case where we need to like delete things from the middle. And then I think an array list makes a little bit more sense. I don't know. So we are going to call this that. Oh, okay, bye. This is being interesting. So don't know what that is, but we'll figure it out. There it is. All right. Don't know why it's automatically deleting things for me, but we'll figure it out. This will be our to-do items. This will be a new list of our list thing. Oh, okay. I know what's going on. The freezing when I'm deleting, that's unknown. But when I'm pasting, it's automatically selecting it. And then I'm just typing, which is overwriting it immediately. So less of that. It's still highlighted. There we go. Okay. I don't know what's causing that, but that's annoying. So there's our to-do list items. It's just an empty list by default. And let's change this into for each var item in our to-do items. So this is now going to iterate over this to-do list. And so we want our value to be at item.completed. It's weird that we're not getting any IntelliSense there, but at item name. And so that should pull in both the completed and the name from those properties that we created here. So we're just referencing those in our list, and hopefully they get reflected back and forth. We can check that by sticking, I think we decided breakpoints weren't going to work, so I'd have to set some like print values or something in there. And I don't even know where those would go. I'd assume they'd go to the console, the web browser console. We can find out. So we've got both of those. There's a increment counter. Let's call this create task. Task is a much better thing to call it. Let's call it task there as well, because why not? And so we're just going to create task, and I need to modify this value, which is going to be our task name. And so let's create that, and we'll just create a string called task name. I'm going to try to bind to a property and see what happens. We've done it with fields. This is binding to a field. I'm curious what happens if I bind to a property. So that's what that is designed to test. We'll see. And then final thing, we actually need our create task. So this is just a void create task. I'm also curious, I don't know how, because I haven't really played with this, but I'm curious if you can pass arguments here. I would assume you can. I'm just not familiar with it. So for create task, we're going to do a to-do items.add a new list item view model with our name equal to task name and completed equal to false. I don't need that extra at there. It doesn't look like syntax highlighting works at all in these function things. So that's something to keep in mind. You're kind of on your own. Cool thing is it's C#, so you can just kind of write it somewhere else and then copy it over if you need that. But if you're just working here, it doesn't seem to work. So anyway, we have our task list. I need another parenthesis there and a semicolon. Now that should is a big word there, but it should create a new to-do item with our name and insert it into our list. This will only work if this is a two-way binding. We're going to get our task name out of this field. If we don't set it back, this isn't going to know what we're talking about. And so everything's going to break. Or we'll just create a bunch of tasks with empty names. If it does work, this will actually get the name we type. So that's something we'll need to test. I'm supposing it's probably not two-way binding, but if it is, that would be great. So I think that's everything we need. We don't need the current count. Let's just replace this with to-do items.count. Let's actually do a where in there. Where item dot completed. And let's just do a not. And so this should print out our items that haven't been completed. So uncompleted items. So if all of this works, we're going to have a list that we can actually insert elements into with a list of how many items haven't been completed yet, we are going to have this checkbox that we can kind of check and uncheck. When we check that checkbox, this should get updated, and it should go in both ways. It should go down when we check something and up when we uncheck something. We should have a task name that we can bind to, and that will bind to our property. If it doesn't work, then we can't use properties. And if it does, then yay. So the cool thing with doing properties means that you can take things that you would use like view models and stuff and actually bind to them, which might be a handy thing to have. We're getting a syntax error. I forgot a semicolon. Oh, okay. So this is cool. Because it broke, I can't edit this file. I don't know what I'm trying to do. This is the generated code behind. This is, if you've ever seen, what's it called? XCS or something for WPF. The XAML and the code behind get compiled into a single thing that looks similar to this. Not the exact same, but this is sort of the taking that CS HTML and making it something you can use. Pretty sure. If you've used WPF or UWP, this should look similar, I think. Not really something that I can use, but we need we need a comma there. Cool. And now we can actually test it. Or it can break more. Is inaccessible due to its protection level. Let's fix that. Sorry, I've been working with a lot of Groovy lately, and Groovy does not care one bit about your protection level. You can access private things if you really want to. And I forgot a whole bunch of things now. It's probably really small for you guys, but there's a bunch of errors now. Which I guess is good. It means we're actually running into issues. Line 32. Everything's on line 32. Well, that's not helpful. Expected a parenthesis. So those line up. Those line up. Those line up. This is fun. Where our items are doing that. Oh, one. Let's fix that. That should take out that final error. And we were getting an error above that. These lines aren't really relevant to where we're at, but I think I screwed this up. Pretty sure. So we're going to take that out for now. And actually, it'll be easier if we just put it in here. And I'm gonna just quickly make a function, void test blah that. Cool. And then let's create a list quick. So to do items equals a new list. This is sort of what I was talking about with the, let's actually call it what it is, a list item view model. So this is sort of what I was talking about with, you can write it in C# files and just get syntax highlighting and then bring it somewhere else. Yeah, where our item does not work. No overload for where takes 0 arguments. Give you a function. Am I doing predicates? Okay, one sec. Item dot completed. And we'll do the count. That's a function. There's one of my problems. Okay. So I had put curly brackets in. Let's take those out. And then we should be good. Can delete all of this. Tab that back so it just looks nice. And then we have our list. Jump over here. Keep the @ but replaced everything else. And now we're kind of at a point where that I feel very better about that. I don't feel good, but I feel better. And so hopefully we get to the next point in this and everything actually works. Yes. So I've actually succeeded in compiling code. Yay. That's not hard at all. We have our list, 0 uncompleted items. We don't have any items, so let's just add astif. It's not two-way binding because we didn't get anything there. And that means we don't have any uncompleted items. Things aren't updating. Great. Let's test. Yeah. So I can do whatever I want to this. It doesn't change anything. I'm going to go try to see if there's a way to easily enable two-way binding because I think that's something we want. And if it doesn't work, then we'll figure something else out because this doesn't do anything for us. We need that two-way binding in order for this to actually function. So yeah, one sec. Okay, so there seems to be a very easy way to do two-way binding. It's to use this @bind command. So what we need to do for these inputs is replace this value with this and do @bind our task name. And so this should create a two-way binding. So as that updates here, it should be reflected back. The cool thing with this is you don't necessarily need to, like here for @task name, we don't need a two-way binding because that can't update. It's just reading it once and then that's it. So you don't need to use this everywhere, but we should be able to do that. And we are getting some syntax highlighting, just not a lot. And that hopefully handles our binding and both places. And so that should go and update that. I have a feeling that's not going to work still, or this count isn't going to work because this is only going to update the completed inside of our models. It's not going to tell this to update. So you may need to do more work to get that to work, and I don't necessarily know off the top of my head what that might be. That's probably for another episode. That's sort of an advanced binding thing where you're watching a list and seeing what the elements inside that list are doing and kind of summing those up. Like if you're doing that, or you're doing like we are missing a button. There was a quote. Got very confused there. So what I'm thinking is, like, if you're doing like accounting and you're adding up a bunch of things, you would want to have, like, if you're just trying to get a sum of, I don't know, how much money you have or whatever, you're caring more about the elements in that list, the revenue in that list, or profit or money in that list, rather than the size of that list, the changes to that list. And so monitoring those and actually getting updates can be a little bit tricky. So let's do a test. Click. Nothing's happening. I'm curious if the console is going to say anything at all. I suspect no. Okay. So it doesn't look like our to-do items updated at all. So let's do a bind to that. We shouldn't need to do this though, because we had it working before. Our to-do items was updating that list previously, so I don't see why we would need to do that necessarily. But let's try it. I don't think this is how you're supposed to use this, but we're gonna try. So if I @bind there, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. It's not a enumerator. Okay, I don't know how to do the list. I'm not sure, because it seemed like we had our task name. Let's see if I can print something out to the console. Console.writeLine to-do items.count. So that's going to print out the size of how many to-do items there are. And so hopefully that actually works. We'll need a semicolon, but hopefully that actually works and we'll actually print that to the Edge console. And if it does, then we can use that to actually see if we're adding things to the list and it's not updating our UI, or if we're not even adding things to the list. So the first time we do this, it should be 0 because I'm doing it. Let's move it down there. So the first time it'll be 1 now that I moved it down, and then 2 and so forth if it's working and actually updating the list. If that's the case, this is wrong. If that's not happening, if we're just constantly seeing 0, something down here isn't doing what we expect, and so we'll have to look at that. But hopefully it's straightforward. I think we're back. If you saw a cut there, everything just froze on my computer, and I'm not sure why, but it seems to be better now. The screen just literally locked up, and I don't know if that's part of the compiling thing and I just did something weird, but we'll see. All right, so I clicked that a few times, so we should see a number of entries in our console. Or nothing. Nothing's okay too. I would have really liked to see something though, because now I'm lost. I don't know how to print to this console, to the web console, other than doing like JavaScript-y things, and that doesn't really make any sense. So I'm not sure. It seems like we're adding to this because we were previously, but we were incrementing a counter and using that. We weren't using a for each. So that could be part of the problem. But at the same time, it doesn't really make any sense for this to be the problem. Let's see, we're doing a list. So let's assume that the for each is our issue. If that's the issue, I can comment that out. I don't know how. Well, we'll just delete it. Sure. I did copy it, so I guess we're not totally lost. Before int I equal to 0, well, I is less than our to do task dot count dot length, whatever, and then we'll do plus I. That should just iterate over everything, and so hopefully the result is the same. The only difference we have to do here is we don't have this task anymore. We have to do task I and just kind of look it up. So I guess it's a good thing we did that array list, because this would have been less good in a linked list. So that should get us to the same point. It's just using a normal for loop. We know that was working. We only know though that it was reading the value. We don't know that it was actually doing much of anything else. So to do tasks items. There we go. Let's try this again. See what happens. Maybe it crashes my computer again. That'd be great. And so now we get here, and either it all breaks again, or that fixed it, which wouldn't make any sense, but we'll see. Still broke. I think that's probably a good thing, because that shouldn't have fixed anything. So I'm gonna revert. Because that if that doesn't work, it means there's something else going on. Our binding is doing something. That could have been, this part could have been broken, but I'm pretty sure a for each loop works. Pretty sure I know how to do those. So I don't think that's the problem. It was just sort of clarification in my testing. And so I think we can move on and try to look at other things that might be the issue. Like this. I think this might be our problem. The next step that I want to do is not really what I want to do, but it should work. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the actual to-do list. So to-do items equals a new list of list item view models. And we're going to plug the new list into it, or the old list into it. So this is effectively just copying the entire thing and replacing it, but it should trigger an update because that's actually going to change now. This reference is changing. The problem is we are watching the elements inside of it. So we don't, the reference to that list item or that list is constant. It doesn't change. And so if you're just watching that reference, you're not going to see any difference no matter how many items you add. But if we replace the reference with a new list, then theoretically we get something entirely new. And so that reference changes, which should trigger a UI update. It's not pretty, and I'm sure there's a better way to do it. But for a hack, I think this should work. And if it does, then we'll kind of get some clarification on how this whole thing is working. If it's just watching the references of your objects, this will kind of prove that out. If this doesn't work, then something else behind the scenes is going on. So test. Okay. I was sure that was gonna work. Okay, now I'm paranoid. Var test new list equals a new list of list item view models from our to-do items. And then we're going to do new list.add and say to-do items equals the new list. Please work. Like, shoot. This may be something I need to do more work on because this is my last guess. Otherwise, I'm already at like the limits of my knowledge of this tool. So I'm just kind of guessing, trying to figure it out by poking at it. This may not be a good use to do that. We may need more. So I will pick this up in another video and we'll kind of do that. I was assuming this would be relatively straightforward for the list thing. And it kind of let us test a number of things, different view bindings, all of that stuff. I just don't know how to detect this list changing. Something's changing, but I don't know how to figure it out. So yeah. Also, if anybody has used this tool and knows how to like get debugging working at all, that would be handy because I can't even like place breakpoints. And the console log didn't work. I'm assuming there's something else that would write out, but I don't know what that would be. So I can go and look that up. But if you guys have suggestions, just call them out in the comments and we can look at that. But I'm probably going to be doing a little bit more with this. The World of Zero website needs a rework, and I was kind of toying with doing this. I think that'd be a terrible idea. We'd probably use React, at least initially. But I just kind of wanted to see what this offered and where it was. And I think this kind of got me a little bit clearer on that. If you guys use it, let me know in the comments. I'd love to see what you guys make with this, or if you're just playing around with it and run into some cool features, call those out because I'm sure a lot of other people would love to see them too. So yeah, that's it for this video. So until next time, see you, internet.